show the installation of handholds. So the first thing you're going to want to do is to take some 1mm strips of cardboard cereal box and pre-harden them with 2-to-1 glue. Because we're going to cut them into very small pieces and they tend to delaminate if you don't pre-harden them. So take the 1mm strips and just cut 1mm squares, essentially, out of one of them. You need quite a few of these per vehicle. So once you've got a significant pile of them, take your 4-to-1 glue, and we're just going to put the base of the handholds on. Now with this top row on the left side, always start with this one, because if it's forced down at all by that vent above it, then it will force the whole line down. Because as you can see, it's kind of 2 rows of handholds. So if this is an oversized part, sometimes you'll have to move that down a little bit. Just move the whole row down with it, or else it will look very strange. Hopefully you've cut that piece small enough, but that's not always the case. It's not bad to move it down a tiny, tiny bit, if need be. So try to line these all up pretty nice with each other and the marks. Sometimes you have to struggle to get them in position. They tend to, if you get a little bit of glue on the tip of whatever you're working with, they tend to stick to your tool rather than to the surface. So there's 4 handholds on that side and 3 on this side. Okay, there's a couple on top here. Now, you're going to want to watch this very carefully. So you can see this turret is going to come and knock those handholds right off there unless we install them quite far back. So you want to find out where that position is and mark it, because it's a little bit different on each model. So that's the most forward position you want to have anything coming to. Now this is only the t-34-85 that you have to do that for. The rest of them you can put the full length handholds on the back. But it's just too much of a pain to do it on the 85. So use your marks as a forward point and don't make this any farther forward than that. That takes care of the chassis, so I'm going to set this on there very carefully so as not to knock anything, and I'm going to continue holding it by these, because danger until the actual tow hooks are on here. These things are really easy to shear off just by brushing them with your finger, and you don't notice doing it either, which also isn't nice. And sometimes you leave a bit of material left, so you got to scrape that off before you can even attach the new tow hook base. It's a pain to mess it up now, so just be careful. until we've actually got the tow hooks on there. And even once, not the tow hooks, the handholds on there. And even once they're on, still maintain very careful attitudes until they've been hit with a layer of hardener. I've definitely called them tow hooks once, and probably at least once that I didn't notice. I apologize. They're not tow hooks. You try to tow the vehicle with these, they instantly break off. And the guy be like, "What are you doing? You're crazy." So I've got a couple on here already, and one of them's on here for an important reason. If you cut your handholds too long, then there's no real way. If this one's too long, then there would be 2 layers, and it's way too hard to cut. You'll just knock them off, which sometimes happens anyway, but it's not that bad. It's recoverable if it does happen. So when you're cutting them, use a pretty fresh or a brand new blade and brace the handhold somehow with your finger. And you just want to kind of saw it. But keeping in mind it's pretty delicate still. You can usually trim it a little easier once you can see what's going on and the excess length is off. Okay, so that's one trim. We'll see if we can get this one successfully as well. You can see it's a little bit overhanging there. Just best way to do it is just set the blade up and then just saw it across a bit. Yes. Just estimate the lengths. They're not all going to be the same, which is why I don't give a standard length to cut them to. Like, not only are some of them closer together than others, so there's a couple very small ones, but I think some of the ones on the turret are longer than others. And there's some randomness to where you set the little bases for them. I mean, just because you can't see the symbol once you've got the square on there, so they don't always go in exactly the same place. So just estimate. If they're very much short, you might have to discard a couple. Just cut a few extra. That's fine. Okay, that will have to be trimmed a little bit on the one side, but not very much. Which is why we trimmed this one already, or else it's very hard to get. And the other one, that's too short for that. Try to remember to hold it up nice and close so you can see exactly what I'm doing. Try to get them to line up so it looks like 2 distinct levels of handholds. I wouldn't use glue any stronger than 4:1 for the setting process, because it is nice to have a little bit of time to move them around once you've begun putting them into position. And if you do have to do the, like if they're a little bit long and you do have to overlap them strategically away from each other. So this top one, I will overlap away from this one, in case I've only got long ones left. Not that that one's particularly long, actually. It's about right. long. Maybe these ones that look the right length are actually too short. That'll do. Not horribly short. If you find that you're only coming to like halfway across the bases, then you're definitely going to want to have longer pieces. It'll show quite a bit. I mean, best of all options is they all end exactly at the same spot and they look perfectly the same. But that's hard to get. Unless you make them all extra long and just trim them off. Guess you can get it that way. Okay, so we got to do these shorter ones here. Now that there's a couple issues with this. It's nice to have them the right length because if you overlap them to the back, then you're in danger of chopping that hinge. And if you overlap them to the front, then you can't put the turret on until they're cut off. And then when you place it, just make sure that's going to work. It's pretty close. We can trim a little bit off those corners to make it clear that. I've got nothing but extra long ones here, so I'm just going to have to overlap and trim later, which is a perfectly legitimate way of doing them. In the past, I have cut them all long and end up trimming them all. It's a bit longer of a process, but you do get them. You don't have any short ones. It's kind of nice that way. And still holding, because if you brush these even a bit, you'll knock them out of position. So still holding it by those track covers. Oh, that's not long enough. Yes, these ones on the turret are quite a bit longer. The side ones on the turret are quite a bit longer. So that would have been way too long for any of the others. That's perfect for there. Alright, and that, so let them dry, and then trim any that are long, and then right away hit them with some 2-to-1 hardener, and just don't let it bulk up underneath them, so kind of whisk it away if there's any formation of glue underneath them, because you want to be able to see underneath them. They create cool shadows and everything.